Okay, so I've had a number of people reach out and ask me questions about the homework assignment, question number 3. This is for homework assignment number 1. So I thought I would take some time to review that information with you guys. So in the upper right-hand corner, what I have is an open R session. Obviously, that's in RStudio. The bottom right-hand corner, I have a file that's open. It actually contains my script, right? So you can see that my script is open from this file right here. This is a file which I'll be saving files to and reading files back into our session from. And then the upper left-hand corner, I have a text editor open. In this case, I just have Notepad++ open. There are a number of text editors that you can use, Atom, Sublime, and so on and so forth. I have no preference on which text editor to use. In this case, I just have this one open for ease of use. Okay, so let's go back to the R session here. The first couple of things you're going to need to do is you're going to need to load some packages. In this case, you can use the install.packages function to load the BIOS manager. That's a package you'll need to have loaded in order to load packages that are currently housed in the Bioconductor database. So then to load packages in the Bioconductor database, you just use this line of code, BIOS manager : install, and the name of the package. That'll install the package that you're interested in actually using. Now, the first time you run this code, you'll need to install those packages. I already have them installed, so I'm going to skip those lines of code. Next thing I'll need to do is I'll need to set a working directory. And in this case, what I've done is I've created a character string here and saved that as an object called home.dir. And then I'm passing that object on to the setwd function to actually set my working directory. In this case, this directory is this file down here in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Second way that you could do this, you could go to session and then set working directory, then choose directory, and then you can just navigate to the file that you want to set as your working directory and click open. It'll automatically execute that set working directory function here in your R console. So I'm going to go ahead and load this home directory object and set my working directory. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and actually load the file-based library. Now, this ls function, what it does is it prints out all the objects that are currently in your environment. So if I print it right now, the only thing that you see is the home directory object because I've loaded the home directory when I ran this line of code. You can also see this information if I go into the environment tab in RStudio. You can see that now I have home.dir and what's actually saved in that object loaded into my environment. So then I'll go ahead and load the AA map database. This function data comes with the file-based library, and so I need to have that package loaded in order to execute this function. Then after that, I'll run an ls again. Now you can see that I actually have the AA map data set loaded. Then if I click on my environment, you can see it loaded here in my active session. Let's go ahead and take a look at that object. What you see is you see a column, a data frame in which you have column-wise amino acids, and then in the rows you have different information about each respective amino acid. Okay. So let's take a look at the class of each column in this data frame. And what you see is the first several columns are actually a factor, class factor, and then the last two columns are actually a logical, class. Now the factor is sort of a specialized character string that you can utilize to establish specific levels or orders of the data, and the logical class is usually a true false, and so that's exactly what you see here. Let's go ahead and print out what's in my active environment again. And now you can see that this l.temp is in my active environment because I've loaded it here. We can also list the files in my working directory, and that's this directory right here. You can see that the only file that's listed there is this homework assignment .r file. And because that's the only file that you see here in this directory. And so loading the file into my active memory, loading the data set into my active memory here here does not actually write that file onto my computer. All right, so as soon as I close my R session, if I do not save that file onto my computer, then I would need to re-execute this code in order to reload that data set. So let's go ahead and save this as a temp file. It's just a small temporary file. All right. If I execute that line of code, what I see is that there are no changes to the objects in my environment. But now if I list the files in this directory, now I see this aa.map temp file shown here in my actual working directory. If I remove the aa.map function or remove the aa.map data set from my active environment using this rm function, what I see is that I get the same two files returned that are in this working directory. But now if I run ls, which shows the objects in my active environment, I no longer see that aa.map object loaded into my environment, as you would see here in this line of code. So we can reload that aa.map data set. Now, when I list the objects in my active environment, I can see that aa.map is reloaded into my active environment. So that sort of demonstrates how you can save a file to your computer and then reload it back into R. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to save this file as a text file, and then we're going to use a text editor to actually change the file. So I'll just use the write.table command and then several arguments indicating that I'm going to use a tab delimited separator. So I go ahead and execute that line of code. Now you can see that I've loaded that text file, saved that text file to my computer. If I run this list.files function again, you can also see that that text file is now loaded or saved onto my active directory. So let's go ahead and modify this file. And so I'm going to go ahead and close this change log file that's open in a notepad that automatically opens the first time you open the program. I'll just drag this file over onto Notepad++. Now this is a tab delimited file, and so between the separators between each column is a tab character, or tab keystroke, if you will. And you can basically see this data set loaded into this text editor right now. So the homework assignment asks you to add another column with some additional information onto this table. And so I'm not gonna articulate the exact information that's supposed to be loaded. I'm just demonstrating how to actually add the column here. But if I click tab and then say I type a new column here, right, that would add a new header to the table. And if I hit the down hit tab again, then I can add new information to that column. And then if I continue that through the rest of the data set, through each record, and add new information into the new column of my table. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Each line I'm hitting the tab button, tab, paste, tab, paste, tab, paste. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file, and I'm going to save it as a new name. So it goes save as. Okay. Now what I want to do, let me make this smaller so I can see. I need to save it as the same name that I'm going to read this in. So I'm going to save it as aa.map-w-change.txt change.txt. Okay, and then let's save it in my directory here. Okay, so now I've saved that file here under my working directory. So now to read it in, all I have to do is execute this line of code, read.table. It says there's no file directory. probably because I spelled it wrong. Clicked the wrong button. Darn it, I don't want to stop that here. Nine. Okay, so let's read this file back in here. Okay, so now I just had to change the name, make sure that the name is spelled correctly. And you can just see that I've loaded the table into this object AA map with change. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at columns. You can see that I've loaded them into character this time, character data set, character columns instead of factor columns. It's not such a big deal. And I still have the logical columns that we read before. And then I have a new column, that's a new character column. And then you can see that in this new column, I now have my new information. So that concludes an example of how to execute homework question number 3 on assignment number 1. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on the discussion.